Hey everybody, welcome back. This week we are going to talk about Ironman racing and pacing at the intermediate level. So this means you are no longer a beginner. Perhaps you've already finished an Ironman, or you've done several seasons of triathlon racing, or you're coming from a good solid endurance background in another sport, like you've run marathons or have done grand fondos, cycling, things like that. So you've got experience. You are just now looking to dial in the time on a race goal at Ironman. So we're going to talk a little bit about the training and then a lot about the pacing and racing on race day. So there are two charts linked below. I didn't make either of these charts, but if you really want to follow along, it'd be good to open them up and have them accessible so you can understand what I'm talking about. The first chart is talking about weekly TSS goals for Ironman training. TSS is training stress score. That's a metric from Training Peaks. I'm not sure if other platforms use this exact number or this exact phraseology, but I've been using Training Peaks for more than 20 years, so that's what I use. And you can see that whoever wrote this article or chart, thinks that a low end of hours for an Ironman is around 12 hours, which I would concur with, and the high end for training is around 30 hours. Let's stop for a second and I'll admit that if you're able to train 25 to 30 hours in a week, you don't have a regular job. Okay, so that is unrealistic if you are a working spouse with kids. Don't even try that. You will drive yourself bananas. I just want to get that out there. The second part of that is the low end and the high end of the TSS, and they have it listed as 590 on the low end and 14 or 1500 on the high end. Again, that top number is super high. You need to be able to recover a lot. You really are not working much if you're training that much. And that's fine if that's your life. That's okay. That's you. It's not me. It's not anybody else. Now, I went and looked at a few samples from my athletes, and my athletes that are in the 15 to 16 hour range, their TS score was 750, 850, depending on the week and the intensity in that week. So 16 hours is around an 800. It's going to be plus or minus, right? And so you can do the math on that, right? 30 hours is getting up to around that 1400. That's part one. So you need to set up your training in such a way that you are training as much as you can, most of it at lower intensity, and you are able to recover and then come back the next day, the next week, and do it again, right? Key things you want to hit in training would be 2 or 3 100-mile bike rides, if not more than 100 miles. Getting up into that 16 to 20-mile long run range once or twice. Again, we're talking intermediate athletes, not beginner, not advanced. And comfortably swimming 3,000 yards in a session or 3,000 meters in a session where you're not gassed at all, right? Because if you're gassed after 3,000 meters swimming, you're going to struggle for the rest of the day. So you need to be swim fit at this point. So I did bring a graphic today. We're going to see how this works out. This is talking about the energy systems. Let's see if that shows up. There it is, right? The energy systems that we're using when we're exercising. The fat burning versus carbohydrates. All right, exercise intensity down here at the bottom. Now, what this means is at a certain point in your exercise intensity, you're switching from burning mostly fat to mostly carbohydrate. So you're asking, what is that point? That point is right about 65% of your VO2 max. And that corresponds, if you're using a 6 or 7 zone system, to low zone 2. And if you have looked at the charts, you will also see that the range of Ironman bike, for most people and at this level, is going to be 66 to 73% of FTP. So This chart, which is super advanced, as you can see, is basically saying that that point is where you need to spend the majority of your Ironman training and racing. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Your Ironman training and racing is all at a relatively low intensity compared to your VO2 max or even your lactate threshold, right? This point is corresponding also to, wow, there's one more. This is the fun stuff with when you get into science. They're all mostly the same, talking about it from different ways. VT1, ventilatory threshold 1. All right. So the reason being, an Ironman, I got to move towards the camera so it doesn't stay dark. An Ironman is a super long day. And if you're exercising for 10, 12 hours, you need to be prepared to burn those calories for that long. So our training needs to be low. Our race intensity needs to be relatively low. Where you're getting the calories is going to be your stored carbohydrate, your muscle glycogen, and whatever you're taking in on the race course. There's another thing that you could put down here that would look like this. It's not exactly right, but this is intake. One more time, back to this super fancy chart. That's the calories that you're taking in during the race. The higher the intensity, the more your body's going to depend on what you're getting in right then, right? The pure sugars and simple carbohydrates. So that's all the training, okay? Most of it should be lower intensity. Most of you, especially if you're fired up and you're training with other people, are going to spend too much time at a higher intensity. That's not the worst thing in the world. You will make advances in your ability, but if you're consistently training at like 80 or 85% of FTP, or you're running at what I would consider half marathon pace or 10K pace, it's not the most efficient training for Ironman. End point. All right, so racing. So regardless of what your hours are looking at, if you're looking at like an 11-hour race, a 13-hour race, a 15-hour race, now that you have the goal, you have to break down how to get there. So point one is that you need to be competent on the swim. Ideally, you can swim faster than an hour and a half. All right. So if you're not quite there, if you can't swim an hour and a half Ironman swim, you need to spend more time in the pool unless you're 75 years old. If you're 75, God bless you, and you swim that fast, that's amazing. On the bike, again, we need to be very careful with our energy output, right? So we're riding at maybe 68%, maybe 70% of our FTP. This is where you want to look at the second chart, and this is the TSS score that you can see with intensity factor versus the time. So if you're aiming for a 5.5 hour, let's say, I don't have the chart open, but if you want to be safe, you need to keep your score under 280 TSS if you are using Training Peaks or one of the systems that supports that number. If you're a super strong runner and you want to take a chance, then you're maybe up to 300 on the TSS. But if you go over 300, then you have a really high likelihood that you're going to blow up and you're not going to be able to finish the run. The reason being, I would put the chart back up, but it's messing with the coloration on the video. The reason being, you have now burned too much muscle glycogen and you're going to bonk, right? You're just not going to be able to take in enough calories on the race course to support a continued effort of relatively hard running, relatively hard being at a low intensity, but you're not stopping and walking, right? So we've got to be careful with our bike effort. Part two is if you are aware of the variability index, and that is how much do you jump up and down when you're biking? If you're climbing a hill, are you all of a sudden shooting up to 90% of your lactate threshold? Are you going over your lactate threshold to push over the hill and be a superhero? Guess what happens every time you do that? Back to that chart. We're now shooting up through the energy level systems, and we're burning a bunch of stored muscle glycogen, and that's going to come back to bite us at the end. So that is a pseudoscientific way of saying you need to ride as smoothly as possible. Your variability index should be below 1.05, and ideally it's like 1.02 or 1.03, meaning you're only changing a tiny bit. If you're going uphill, maybe you go a tiny bit harder on the uphill, and on the downslope you're going a tiny bit easier. But we're talking like little percentages. And yes, people are going to pass you on the bike when you're going up at this nice steady effort, but your breathing's under control and they're over gasping and panting. Guess who you're going to see walking at mile 15 on the run? So control your effort on the bike. Very important. A big part of Ironman racing is all the calories that you need to take in during the race itself. So our starting points are like 4 to 5 calories per pound per hour on the bike, and 2 to 3 calories per hour, 2 to 3 calories per pound per hour on the run. All right, so that is relative 1 to 2 calories per pound. Excuse me, 1 to 2. So, that's a lot of calories. So if you're a 150-pound person, you're aiming for 300 calories on the bike. That's, a starting point, and you're aiming for 150 calories on the run. You may adjust upwards or downwards from those points. It may be too much for you to take in, 300 calories or 350 calories, but you want to take in the maximum amount that you can absorb and process, right? Absorb and process to, create energy for you to continue onwards, to mitigate how much of your muscle glycogen you are burning. Because our goal is to reach the end before we exhaust all our muscle glycogen. Again, I'm going to show you this chart one more time, right? So you got to keep all your efforts around here. You're getting calories from here, but where's my carbs, right? This is all muscle glycogen, and this is your stored fat, okay? So we got to be aware of these systems. If you don't understand that, you need to read up a little bit more on the energy systems. And then on the run, the biggest mistake people make is going out a little too hard at the beginning of the run. And on a marathon, we're talking the first few miles, right? So again, referring to our energy systems, our thresholds, we want to keep this heart rate in like a low to mid zone 2. We want to keep our FTP at like, 70-ish% on the run if you're using a power meter on your running. We got to keep it low, because if we go too high, it's all going to come back to bite us at the end of the race. And the end could be the last 10K. It could be the second half of the marathon. It's any portion, that's not the beginning of the run. Okay. So control your effort. Keep your pace. If you understand pacing, if you know what your Ironman marathon pace is supposed to be, about a 9-minute, and you see you're running 8:30s for that first mile or two, you need to slow it down. You may feel really good, and you may feel like, oh man, I really can keep this pace up. You can't. It's not going to work. Slow it back down to 9:05, and dial that in, because if you've already done an Ironman, you know how uncomfortable and how tired you are towards the end of this race. And so you need every little bit of energy to push through that discomfort, that fatigued feeling in the last few miles of the run. You're going to make or break your race in the last 8 miles of the run. Maybe you left 5 or 7 minutes on the bike. That's okay. Maybe you feel like you could have gained 3 or 4 minutes at the beginning of the run. Doubtful, but okay. But if you can mostly run, walk through the aid stations, but mostly run the last 7 or 8 miles of your Ironman, you're going to have a good day. So one last tip on the run itself. I would recommend walking through the aid stations, making sure that you're getting a full tank of gas with whatever cups you're drinking. You want to switch between water, Coke, or cola, whatever they have on the course, and sports drink. If they're using a sports drink on the course that you are not really used to, you either need to figure out how to bring your own or go purchase that product and get used to it with training. So that's one of the tricky parts of course management and race management, is being aware of what's going to be offered on the course. You may want to stick with water, salt tabs, and gels, but figure out what's going to work for you in training. If you don't figure it out in training, race day is going to be a big question mark. So this has been about intermediate level Ironman racing. Take a look at those charts. Take a look at the articles that are linked below that. That's some helpful stuff. I may have written some of it, but other ones I did not. This one hopefully is a helpful video for you. Thanks for checking in. Like and subscribe, please. See you next time.